Anybody here can get it. Treat the game like a scrimmage now. Master B with the flow. I swear nigga got no limits now. I've been ballin' for a minute. Whole team full of winners. Anybody here can get it. You tuned into the realest now. Anybody here can get it. Treat the game like a scrimmage now. Master B with the flow. I swear nigga got no limits now. I've been ballin' for a minute. Whole
Off the
team full of
platform.
winners.
Here we are with myself, Jackson Hinch, and obviously joined by Greg Turrell. How are you, Greg?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Good, thank you. It seems to be just us these days. The other co-hosts are more like guests now, I think.
One's at swimming with his with the kids, and I think one's just probably still sleeping. So
he pretends he's busy.
Yeah.
But and also this episode we are joined by Mr. Delroy McQueen. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you keeping?
Good, bro. Good. Bit better than you guys, it seems.
Sorry?
Bit better than you guys, it seems.
Hey, it's always good being new.
Yeah. I just honestly, when I heard that there was a powerlifter called Delroy McQueen, I thought someone was fucking with me. It's like a superhero name. You know what I mean? Like I was sure that someone was messing with me. You're going to be versing Delroy McQueen. I was like, who is that?
Delroy McQueen.
Yeah. What?
So Delroy, you grew up in London, yeah? At quite a rough, was it, in your words, a rough estate? Is that how you would describe it, or a rough part of town?
I didn't really see it as rough, but when you see it in the media back then and everyone else, it was almost compared to like the Bronx, which I don't think it was really that bad, to be honest. And it's only literally a few miles away from the gym that Jackson trained at, Bulldogs gym. It's literally only about 2 or 3 miles away from there where I grew up. I appreciate the area. When you move on to different things, it makes you appreciate things that you move on to. So it did me good being brought up in that environment. Yeah.
So it was they call them estates, It's like mixed housing or quite condensed sort of apartments and so forth.
It's a housing estate where all the flats are really on top of each other, big populations, sort of crammed into a smaller sort of space.
Nice. So you've got quite an extensive background. I mean, powerlifting has only been the last few years. When I say last few years, many years, but going all the way back to weightlifting, eh? So Commonwealth gold, 3 times Commonwealth gold in the 2002 Commonwealth Games. That's awesome.
Yeah, I won gold in the snatch, clean and jerk, and the overall total in 2002 Games in Manchester, which come to a shock to a few people, but it's one of those goals I had set in mind that I really wanted to do. And I've done everything in my power to sort of achieve that goal at the time.
How did you get into that? How does someone fall into weightlifting in London?
With me, it was just literally luck of the draw. So in PE at school, we had various options. So we could have played football, we could have played rugby and various other sports. And on one of the terms, weightlifting come up as one of the options. And so sort of being a young man, everyone wants to lift weights. So I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go. I thought it was just going to be weight training, but it's actually full-on sort of Olympic-style weightlifting, which in the beginning is very difficult to learn and takes a lot of time.
Did you have the teacher was trained in Olympic weightlifting, or were they just kind of winging it, or? Well, how many weightlifters go into
actually? What happened was basically my weightlifting coach was actually a national powerlifting coach, and he was on one of his international competitions, and someone said to him for a joke, I bet you could never coach a weightlifter to a good standard. So John Jackson, being the man he is, he's like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So as soon as they arrived back, he sort of contacted the schools in the local area to see which ones he can get into, and lucky for me, my school accepted his offer to sort of come in and do some coaching. So he started doing sort of 1 day a week at the school, and then from there I went along to his weightlifting club, and it just took off from there, really.
Wow.
It's starting to, I think there's Max here in Wellington who's just started to get lifting as like a accredited subject as such. So that's cool that you guys had it like back then. That's mint.
Yeah, when I done it, it wasn't an accredited subject or anything like that. It was just a complete one-off. We come into school to just coach weight training. So it weren't as a part of the national curriculum at the time. So I was just pretty lucky, really, to get involved in one of those sessions.
I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like weightlifting and powerlifting were subjects in schools in maybe the 80s. I know the US probably had powerlifting and weightlifting as subjects that you could go through to and get scholarships for. maybe well into the 90s and in the early 2000s. But for the life of me, I can't seem to see it a lot in schools these days. I don't know if it's just dropped off or, I think
you just have to be lucky in terms of what area you're in the UK. If you've got a weightlifting coach who's sort of willing to go out their way and sort of get into the schools and teach the lessons, and when they go into the schools, bear in mind, chances are for the first couple of lessons, they probably won't even get paid for it. So it's not like they're sort of benefiting financially from it. So it was more sort of, he gave his time for free to actually do that, which again, I wouldn't be here now if he didn't sort of do it at that stage of my life.
I thinking back to when I was at school and there was no powerlifting or weightlifting, but there was a weights gym. And I remember there was we had one reliever come in a few times every few months or so, big stocky lad too, and he was a lifter. And like thinking back now, I'd almost forgotten him, but I think he played a bit of an influence on me, like just as far as like, hey, let's get strong, because it wasn't really something that anyone said. Let's get strong, let's try and get some big muscles here going on. And so for young boys coming into the gym, that probably, I don't know, for me anyway, that might have sparked something. It's a shame I wouldn't mind seeing.
I think sometimes in life the right influence comes along at the right time, and you just sort of follow it from there. I had no idea at the time I was going to be a good weightlifter or I'd really get into weightlifting. It's one of those things I thought, I'd give it a go just to see what it's like. And once I started, I never really stopped since.
Yeah.
So did you find that because I mean, powerlifting and bodybuilding, you can sort of pick out the people that are going to be good almost, because they just sort of, most of the time they just keep progressing past everyone else. Did you have that with weightlifting? Did you just keep progressing the whole time, or did you find it quite hard at the start?
At the start, it was quite hard to learn. I wasn't the best in the group by any means. There was probably about 5 or 6 others that were way better than me at the beginning. But I'm one of those people, if I start something, I'm going to pursue it. And so all I've done is kept training hard, listening to all the instructions I was given. And then it's got to a stage, I wanted to be the best I could be. So as the lessons went on, I sort of got better than the next person and gradually sort of worked my way to sort of the front of the pile, really. It started off with probably like 15 of us. And then after a few months, I was the only one left there lifting.
Awesome.
So people's attention spans are pretty short, eh?
Yeah, I think with weightlifting, it's not like powerlifting. Like you can go and basically get someone in the gym and some sort of fashion, you can get them to deadlift something relatively heavy. Weightlifting is a lot different to that. It's far more technical and just a lot more difficult to get into the positions and learn the sort of timing of when to go under the bar, how high you should pull the bar. So it's a lot more complex. And I think that's the biggest part of it. People just get frustrated and just don't have the patience.
So he would have started you with like a dowel, like a broomstick?
Oh yeah, literally. So what he done started us like to begin with. He was smart the way he went about it. He sort of taught us like weight training exercises like bench press, bicep curls, all the ones that young people want to do. And then at the end of the lesson, then the broomstick will come out and then you do sort of like some of the movements as part of the cool down. And as the lessons went on, those like movements become the beginning of the class. And then you sort of just advance them from there. So it's very clever how he done it to actually get people sort of into it to begin with.
Like dangling the carrot, here you go. You can do some bench press, but now you got to do this boring shit.
Yeah.
You do the bench press and bicep curls, just easy stuff, and then eventually you have to learn something a little bit more difficult and harder to learn.
Yeah, not so pretty. Yeah. What age was that, Delroy? How old were you then?
I was 15 when I started, so that was like over 30 years ago.
Okay, and did it lead to any competitions really early on? Was it the school involved in any kind of inter-school comps, or was it all just training?
My first competition was about 6 weeks after we started the classes.
Wow.
Was the London Schoolboy Championships. Yeah. And within the class lessons, where I just got better and better, I thought I was really good. And then I got into competition, and then I thought, I absolutely suck. I think I finished like 7 out of 10. But me being me, I was like, I can't walk away finishing 7th place at anything. So every competition, I worked harder and harder and gradually sort of moved my way up the rankings slowly to eventually won that competition and then sort of moved on to bigger competitions from there.
That's the thing with both powerlifting and weightlifting. Like you look around your gym and you think, I'm pretty good. I'm lifting more than these guys. And then you go to a competition and you quickly realize that you're just a small fish in the ocean.
Powerlifting's an interesting one like that, because in New Zealand, I don't suppose you've got very many federations over there. So if you compete, you compete against a number of people. Over here in powerlifting, it sort of grates me a little bit where there's so many federations that people can walk into their first competition, and all of a sudden they've done one competition and they find themselves like in a position to be British champion, where they haven't really sort of beat any sort of level of opposition to do that. And I from how hard I had to work to get into weightlifting and work my way up the rankings, I find that even now quite difficult to sit back and look at.
With weightlifting in the UK, is there one federation, two federations? Are there different groups doing weightlifting?
With weightlifting, there's only one.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and that's literally, so if you're a British champion, you're British champion, because there's only one place you can actually do it competitively.
I mean,
how they
it's the same with most sports. This is the thing that annoys me with powerlifting. There's just, like most sports, there's one way you do it, and that's it. And then if you're the best, you're the best. You know it. Whereas powerlifting, somewhere along the line, we branched off. Like when we had Kathy Millen on, and she said there was only one federation. So when you were the best, you were the best. And now somehow,
can you imagine if that was the same with rugby? We're the rugby world champs, yeah, but there's only 10 of you.
Yeah,
exactly. And there's what grates me is you got people like will post up on social media that for argument's sake, British champion at 110 kilos. They don't put no federation or anything like that. They just put their British champion. But how can you sit back and call yourself British champion where there's someone in Britain that can actually lift more than you?
Yeah. You say you're under 110.
It's not quite right.
Yeah, you're under 110, British champion. You're totally like 600.
Yeah. What I think I've noticed, well, correct me if I'm wrong on this one too, but what I've noticed with the American system is that, the guests we've got on and what you see on social media is they compare themselves. They don't compare themselves to other federations. They just say, oh, I've got the second biggest total. And there literally is the second biggest total. Like if you go to the Open Powerlifting records, it's the second biggest total in that weight class or with equipped and so forth. Do you do the same in the UK? Do you say, well, I've got the third biggest squat in the country, regardless of federation?
Yeah, we sort of do that in the UK and but the Americans are clever about the way they do it. Because if you look, okay, you've got the biggest squat in the UK or America, but what do you judge that against? Every federation, they've all got the same rules written, but everyone's interpretation of the rules is completely different to the next. So if you've got someone squatting 2 or 3 inches above parallel and they get 3 white lights, how is that an all-time record?
That's the clincher, eh? Like regardless of all the other rules to do with the squat, the number one rule is the depth. Yeah, I mean we can walk it out, you can whatever you want to do, but if you don't get that depth, then game over.
Yeah, and the thing is, the interpretation of the rules, is the way I look at it, there can only be one interpretation of the rules, and that's what the rule book says. It's almost like sometimes you go to competitions, and it's almost like you watch someone squat, you think, no, surely not. And they get 3 white lights, and it's almost like they've made the rules up as they go along.
Yeah. I saw quite a good video on, it's been doing the rounds on Instagram and Facebook the other day. It's from the USPA president. I think he's the president, but he's one of the delegates anyway.
Oh, he does a demonstration.
Does a demonstration with the chick about where the squat depth actually is, and how people keep saying it's your hip crease below your knee, but it's not. It's the top of the quad at the hip versus the top of the quad at the knee. The top of the quad at the hip is not your hip crease.
Yeah, because if he goes all the way back on the girl, he's almost going back almost back towards her butt because that hip crease carries on.
Yeah, your hip crease ends up about an inch on most. Even on a slender person, even on like a 60-kilo girl, their hip crease ends up about an inch lower than the actual top of their quad.
Yeah.
But somehow people are like, oh, it's the hip crease is below the knee, and it's like, yeah, but their hip is fucking level with their knee.
Yeah, sometimes if you've got big enough quads, you barely have to squat down to parallel.
Yeah.
So, I think sometimes just a little bit of a rewording from the rule book might be needed in that respect.
It's challenging when you've got lifters that are over 140, 150, 160 kilos because there's just so much mass there that when they squat down, it's all crease. There's almost a crease from the knee to the hip. Just like where the fuck does the crease start here?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. But at the end of the day, powerlifting's been a sport for how many years? So this issue should have been resolved a long time ago. And we can clearly see, like, when the squat's in or not. You if you lifted long enough, you got an eye for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if you're being a little bit dubious about it, people just do it to suit their own needs in a sense. Think, oh, that's what I squat to, and everyone's got to squat to that sort of height and that sort of thing.
It seems to only recently. I think it's just because people are chasing bigger and bigger numbers. It only seems to recently be an issue. But then also, we've only recently had social media for people to critique it, so it could have been an issue back in the day as well, but just no one saw it. If you know what I mean. Whereas now, what do you reckon?
There is that, but when powerlifting, like before, there was the sort of social media aspect. But bear in mind, there was forums that you'd go onto for powerlifting across the world. So powerlifters across the world would all communicate across different forums. So even though you didn't have social media, you still had a sort of like a network in a sense where you could see everyone's videos. But you didn't have people, but unless you was involved in powerlifting, then you really wouldn't sort of dab into the forums. But now in social media, if you're not a powerlifter, you can come across powerlifting a lot easier.
Last week's guest, Delroy, talked about, she does, Laura Scrow does velocity-based training, and she puts what's the name of the device, Jackson, do you remember?
I'd have to go back and check.
You've got to go back. She literally, there's a device that she puts on the bar, and it's attached to it almost like a phone app. And it records the velocity of the bar as it descends and ascends. And so she has to train to a certain velocity, basically for fatigue management. That sounds it's great. But it sounded like there was a version of that or an extension of that technology that measures bar depth as well. And I just wonder if there's a role in your mind. Yeah. Do you think there's a role in technology coming into powerlifting to measure depth when it comes to the speed of the bar, maybe depth and so forth, and even that pause? You could even just measure the pause. As soon as that the reading says 0, boom, bar is stationary, boom, you can press it. Do you see a role in?
Yeah, I've got one of those. It's called the one I've got is called Beast Sensor, and you can you can use force output. You can measure the velocity of the bar. So they're really good in that respect. But to answer your question, yeah, there's definitely a place for it. So even if you look at sports like football or soccer, as some countries call it, they have goal line technology, which is pretty much the same sort of thing. So if the ball crosses that centre of it, they could say, right, that's a goal. So they could be very, very easily done for powerlifting. And to be honest, if they'd done that, so do you know when you sort of check your squat rack height and everything else, and then set everyone's height at that sort of stage where the referee says that's where your squat depth is, that we're going to say is acceptable for you to pass, then if they brought that technology in, that'd take a lot of the arguments away, and then people can't complain to the referee saying, oh, I think that squat was in, but you give me a bad call and things like that. So it takes all of that away.
I feel like because they're basically an accelerometer that then measure, like, because it's got a piece of string, so that's how it measures the depth and stuff. But I feel like people can, where the bar is on your back, doesn't necessarily, how far the bar travels on your back doesn't necessarily dictate how far your hips travel. If that makes sense.
You'd have to do something where it's actually the sensor, like senses the sort of where your hip should be in relation to your knee. I don't think you could really do it on distance travel with the bar. Because like if you take a wider stance, like for example sumo deadlift, you can shorten the range of the bar quite a lot. So you could probably set up one way when you go and do your depth check, and set up a completely different way when you go into the competition.
And of course, when you're going to set up, you're going to have an empty bar when you set up as well. Versus you could have 400 kilos on the bar, which is probably going to sink into your back.
So there is that. So it'd have to be in relation to where the sort of the top of the thigh, the hip crease is deemed and goes below the knee, and that triggers a sort of sensor. So I think there's a way to do it. I think it would take a lot of sort of trial and error, but it can be done.
Yeah, it'd have to be some sort of laser sensor, right? Your hips are broken through, or whatever it is.
Yeah, all sports evolve, so why shouldn't powerlifting evolve like other sports have?
I mean, every other sport seems to have taken it in. Football, cricket, rugby, tennis. They've all got sensors on the outlines, the touch lines. Like say the goal. Yeah. Cricket's got the flashing. Yeah. What do you call it? I don't know what they're called on the top of the wickets. As soon as they come off, that's it. They start flashing. Once they lose connection.
Yep.
Yes, and the technology's already there, so it's not going to cost a lot of money to produce.
No, and it wouldn't make the refs or the judges redundant, because there's other faults that can happen as well, which technology won't be able to pick up.
Yeah, and they can focus on the other faults and let the technology do their part on that area of the game, the sort of sport. So I think that it would take some experimenting, but I think it can be done, and I think it'd be better for the sport if something like that did happen.
There's the $1 million idea for anyone listening.
I was just thinking, I might actually edit this part out of the
trademark patent pending.
If you do, you've got to split the profits between us. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah, we'll have to get IPF approved first.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's where the money is.
Yeah, I'm sure they only want $250,000. It shouldn't be
just
too
branded
much.
Alico.
Yeah.
Like Alico just stole your idea now, so we're screwed.
They probably have.
We're stuffed. Del, so you obviously 2002 Olympic weightlifting in the Commonwealth Games, and then open powerlifting has your first powerlifting competition as 2004. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that would have been 2004, and that would have been, I think that would have been like the London Powerlifting Championships, and that would have been for Baller at the time.
Yeah,
and that would have been in like some like single ply kit, which weren't really. I didn't really have good kit back then anyway.
So weightlifting and powerlifting used to be under the same federation in Britain.
Yeah, back in those days, there's the same federation that run both sports, and then what happened was the committees fell out, and then powerlifting went their own way. And
who would have thought?
Yeah,
that was where we fucked up. That was where it branched
unheard
out.
of, eh? Yeah, people in powerlifting.
Yeah, but they branched off way before that though, because the first branch, I think there was only Baller, which is basically IPF in the beginning, and then you got a branch off from that. I believe would have been whatever group went to like WPC, and that's where it all began from there.
Yeah, there's always been an interesting relationship between weightlifters and powerlifters. Delroy, you've got a story around, because you've trained when you were training in the weightlifting, you were also training with the powerlifters in the gym, weren't you?
Yeah, it's interesting with weightlifting and powerlifting, because back in like when I lifted, like powerlifters, I would say were pretty respectful of weightlifting, but weightlifting as a sport wasn't respectful towards powerlifting. And bear in mind back then as well, powerlifting had far more success at like sort of world level than weightlifting did. But weightlifting seemed to get all the grant money because it was an Olympic sport. So I was quite lucky, because where I started training, it was basically predominantly a powerlifting gym, and I was doing weightlifting at the time. But when I used to go and do my squats and stuff at the end, I'd join in with the powerlifters to sort of do my squats and that sort of thing, even being a weightlifter. So I didn't really see it as like a bad relationship between the sport. But then when I went to train at Crystal Palace, then that was a little bit different there. They were still friendly, weightlifting and powerlifting, but there was always that little bit of friction there between them as sports.
Why is that?
I think it just comes down to is weightlifting's a sport that got all the money in the UK when it comes to sort of funding. But if you bear in mind that both sports were under the same umbrella, the funding went to Baller, which controlled weightlifting and powerlifting, but weightlifting seemed to always get the biggest chunk of the money. And I think that's what pretty much caused most of the friction between them.
Yeah, I don't know. Are there any countries in the world where powerlifting is funded other than Russia by the government?
Some of the Eastern Bloc countries, powerlifting is funded by the government, but outside of the Eastern Bloc countries, I can't really think of any others off the top of my head.
Because isn't powerlifting, it's the national sport in Russia, isn't it?
One of them.
Eh?
Yeah, anything. Yeah.
Russia, anything that creates success is going to be a national sport.
Yeah, they'll take anything.
Yeah, well, they just haven't been really good at powerlifting, don't they?
Although I think, you know how in the Paralympics they have bench press as their weightlifting event? Those guys get some funding in their countries. Like, I can't remember that big guy's name, but I don't want to mispronounce it. I can't remember it, but the Iranian guy, and he benches like 320.
Oh, that's madness.
He's funded by the government for his thing. I read somewhere he gets, an allowance each year, and they pay for his flights, etc. So like those guys, but it's an Olympic sport. So
yeah, it's an Olympic sport. So governments like that are going to sort of throw money at them.
Yeah, how ridiculous is that as well, though? A 320 bench self lift out
with he's got no leg drive, so that's just pure.
Well, they strap him into the bench. But
I know that struck me in, but obviously, he's just lying there, isn't he? That's amazing.
And
it's incredible. It just shows you what a human body can do and what it's actually capable of.
Yeah, those every time one of those videos pops up, I'm just like, oh, you bastard. So good. So I get a lift out at like 160, let alone like 320. They have to lift it out themselves. It's in the rule book. That's mad, eh?
Ooh, really?
Yeah, it's in the rule books, and they're very strict with the rules in powerlifting. They're like disabled powerlifting or powerlifting with a disability. Very strict.
Maybe that's where we've stuffed up. We're not strict enough.
Yeah.
It's rules are rules, and they're there to be followed. So it's not being strict or anything like that. It's just following the rules.
Following the rules, yeah.
Yep.
So, Delroy, moving from, I know you've got a story here. I'd love to hear it about why you moved from weightlifting to powerlifting. Because obviously, weightlifting's the Commonwealth Games, it's the Olympics, whereas powerlifting doesn't offer that. So, what was the motivation there?
Well, just shortly after I won the Commonwealth Games, I trained at, I lived at Bisham Abbey, which is like a national sports centre. And that's where I trained. And I had like a part-time job there. And I had my sort of funding. But as soon as the Commonwealth Games finished, my funding stopped completely straight after the Commonwealth Games. And then just as my funding stopped, I got made redundant at the same time. So I had to go and get a full-time job, which I literally had to work. It was like 40 contracted hours a week plus personal training on top of that. So I was probably working 60-hour weeks. And I was still trying to sort of do weightlifting as well at the time. And then I sort of continued along that sort of route because I wanted to make the Athens Olympics in 2004. So I trained as hard as I could, and then I thought I was in really good shape to do it because at the qualifiers, the UK or Great Britain was going to get one place. So they decided before the competition started. So whoever got the highest equivalent of like the weightlifting's equivalent of Wilks score would go to the Olympic Games. So I thought, yeah, I'm definitely game on for this. So I got myself in really good shape. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to go to the Olympic Games. Then I got out to the Ukraine for the European Championships. And then when I arrived, they told me that we've changed the rules a bit. So whoever finishes highest in Europe, out of all the British lifters, will go to the Olympic Games. So a few days before I arrived in the Ukraine, one of the 64-kilo lifters competing in the class, where quite a large number of lifters bombed, and it wasn't a very populated class. So we didn't put on a mega performance, and he managed to finish and round inside the top 10. I knew I wasn't going to finish in that because the class I competed at 105 kilos, the standard was absolutely crazy. So you could be sort of 20 kilos behind the top person and then finish like at 19th place or something like that.
Wow.
So it's really sort of tight there. And so as soon as I've heard that they could change the rules, I wasn't even interested in being in the Ukraine. I didn't even want to lift. So I done my half-hearted warm-up. I went out on the platform and just done one snatch. And in the clean and jerk, I done my opening clean and jerk. Then I just left my weightlifting shoes in the hall, and I never went back to compete weightlifting again.
Wow.
I got asked quite a lot of times if I was going to go back to try and defend my Commonwealth Games title. But at that point, I wasn't interested at all. So I was training in the gym sort of after that, just doing some general training, squats and stuff. And there was the British Powerlifting Congress at the time, the BPC. Their British champion trained in the same gym as me. And someone asked me while he was training, what would happen if you lifted against him? And I thought, this is interesting. There's only one way to find out. So I went and done my research online about sort of multiplied lifting. And then I come across Steve Goggins, and he's the first man to squat 500 kilos. And I saw that. Then I was just sort of blown away. I thought, yes, this is what I want to do. Because back then, it's like the WPO, which like for powerlifting terms in multiply was like a big spectacular spectacle. They had like guys like Andy Bolten, like deadlifting at the time 422, which is an all-time world record. And to see that, I've only ever saw guys like deadlifting like the mid 300s. And then when I saw Andy do that, I was like, this is something amazing. So once I saw all of that, that just got me sort of really drawn in, and I knew that's what I wanted to move on to.
So bear in mind, this is early 2000s, so the numbers in the 400s weren't as prevalent as they were today. So that would have been truly amazing. Not that 400 kilos is anything to sneeze at. I mean, there's not that many people doing 400 plus, lifts.
In powerlifting terms, it was credible, and you saw come across like the West Side guys like Chuck Vogapur, Greg Panora, and people like that. And literally, when you saw those guys lift, you just watched them and you thought, I want to do this. It's not like watching a quick powerlifting now, because you watch it and you think, what's going on there? But these guys were actually phenomenal lifters and really talented guys, and actually sort of competed to like what the rules were quite strict back then. So competed to like good solid judging as well.
We've actually got Greg coming on in a few weeks, and one of the stories he's going to talk about, I hope, is that the Louis almost like absolute dedication to the West Side method in terms of creating success and lifted, in multiply or single ply lifting. Did you follow the West Side principles, or did you have your own style of training in multiply?
Do you know what? I don't follow the West Side principles completely, but even now, some of the principles they use, I'll still use in my training. And even to sort of get my squat better back in my equip days, I watch the West Side videos to do it. So you might not agree with some of the things they do, but a lot of what they do is fantastic. And I think a lot of it's just misinterpreted information, to be honest, about how they sort of put their training together.
Well, it's a little, end of the day, it's a little obscure gym in Ohio, isn't it? Yet it's produced 30 world champions in a short.
Yeah, a lot of phenomenal guys. It probably gets a little bit of bad press now for like people sort of competing in competitions and some of them, the judging standards and that sort of thing. But as a principle to get strong, I think Westside sort of speaks for itself. If you don't look outside of powerlifting to like how many sort of NFL teams and that sort of thing that Louis Simmons has been involved with to help with their strength training, I think that speaks for itself.
Yeah, the conjugate system is probably one of the most popular athletic sort of strength and conditioning systems in the world, I would say.
Yeah, the biggest problem with conjugate system is people say they train conjugate, but they don't know the basic rules that you work to within conjugate.
Yeah.
So not giving a complete understanding. And 9 times out of 10, you see someone post online, they train to a conjugate training system where it don't even resemble what it's supposed to be. Like you watch their speed work videos, you tell me that a lot of these guys are moving the bars at 0.7 meters per second. Most of them, like literally, my max be faster than most of what people call speed work when it comes to that. So I think just a lot of misinterpreted information.
We used to, when I first started powerlifting, we started with Shaco and then we moved to West Side. But in terms of speed work, it was like, well, how fast do we have to go? Oh, I don't know, man. Just try and do a little bit faster than you normally would. That was about the extent of it, So it was just interpretation based off a downloaded ebook somewhere,
Yeah, and the thing is, though, when you look at the ebook, like even though it's a small part of it, I think where this bar speed is, I think people skip that part. Because when you look into the ebook, it says 0.7 meters per second will be considered speed work. For some reason, people haven't sort of taken that information in. They think, oh, that weight feels easy. I call it speed work because I can move the bar.
Yeah,
and they're not grinding it.
Yeah, whereas it's probably closer to sort of the repetition effort as such versus the speed work.
And then when they sort of perform the movements like that and they say, oh, speed work doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
It's because they didn't sort of adhere to what the rules are to actually call it speed work.
I suppose it's like any training system, though. I mean, you get a lot of people and they don't actually understand the concept. Like, it's easy to say, right, this is my program, done. But then when you ask them, oh, why is that there or why is that, they can't explain it. I suppose it's the same thing. You need to have that deeper understanding of why you're doing the speed work. Why does it work? Why does it work with the max effort work?
Yeah. I wonder if some training methods don't lend themselves too well to be replicated outside of the home base. Some are quite simple. You can't really get 5-3-1 wrong or anything like that. But maybe the conjugate method, maybe you need just a little bit more study. Maybe a stint at the Westside Gym itself would just hone those skills.
It's not even that. I think all it is interpreting the information. And that's what it purely comes down to. So if you sit down and read it correctly from page to page, well, I'm sure a lot of people don't. They probably skim through and try and find the bits that are relevant to them.
Oh, chains.
So
I'm into those chains.
So all the relevant information sort of gets missed. Because if you look at like the conjugate training system, for example, where it says how long you should leave in between your sort of dynamic lower and max effort upper body session, max effort lower body sessions. So it says 72 hours, but then you see a guy come in, they do their sort of speed work one day, and then the next day you see them coming in doing their max effort work. It's like, hang on a minute, you meant to leave 72 hours between that. And then when you speak to them about that, it's like, it didn't say that in the book. And I said, it clearly does say that in the book. Go back to the pages you didn't read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's understanding what it is, and people just seem to think that just bands and chains, I'm training conjugate. You know, I saw there's another guy that trained in the UK around the same time that I was over there with Del, was David Jenkinson, and he's in the States now training sort of high school level football players, and he trains them. And I just saw a post on him from Instagram today, and he's saying, just because you've got bands and chains doesn't mean you're training conjugate. You should use straight weight on at least like 1 or 2 variations, surely, you know.
Or sometimes you should actually learn how to do the lift correctly before you start putting bands and chains on.
Yeah, that's also another fair point. That's taking it back another step. Some horrendous, like, you know, good morning squats with bands doesn't make it, you know.
I remember when we first saw the description for a box squat. I don't think we got those box squats ever. I don't know if we ever got those right.
Again, there's just lots of different ways to perform a box squat, so it depends what's the most relevant to you.
Even looking back now, I'm thinking, did we actually sit back into that squat and just sit there for a bit and then just sort of lean forward and pop back up again, or did we touch the box and go? I can't for the life of me remember what the rules were around that.
Yeah, and most people just go down, land on the box, fold, and then try and grind their way out of it.
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But so you almost follow sort of those similar principles now, Del, from looking at your training. You do multiple sets of lower reps to get all the reps in. You're doing speed work.
Yeah, I'll do pretty much everything. So I'll do repetition work. So it's all part of conjugate, but I don't have it in a conjugate format. So I'd have like, I'll do my repetition work. So repetition method. I'll do my speed work or speed method. And then I wouldn't really call it max effort. I'd probably call it a heavy training session. Like heavy, I'd consider anything sort of like 80% and above. So and then I'll do a heavy session. I don't really do max effort work, to be honest, because if I sort of done that sort of style of training, I don't think I'll be still here now lifting.
Yeah. So because when I see your training video, so your heavy session will be like a top triple or a top 5 or something like that. That's above, like, say, 80%, yeah?
Yeah, so my head, like anything heavy, I'd consider it might be 5 or 3, sort of 80% and above. And then I'll probably do some drop down sets after that, which would be a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, and then you fill in, obviously you're a big fan of accessories as well, fill in the weak points.
Oh yeah, I always do a lot of accessory work for like the smaller muscle groups as well. So I think that's quite a big thing. And I think the fastest way to get stronger is work on your weaknesses to bring them up.
And so you've been obviously lifting from, like, say, 15 when you started weightlifting. How old are you now? 45?
45.
So you've been lifting for 30 years at a high level. I mean, you probably I will say a high level because you got to the Commonwealth Games and you've done worlds for powerlifting, etc. So longevity is what would you say is the biggest thing for longevity?
I think the biggest thing for longevity is I think one of the things Ed Cohen says best: your body's only got so many heavy lifts in it. Don't waste them in the gym.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. And also listen to your body. Because like, how many times have you walked in the gym? You think, things don't quite feel right today, and then you sort of, my program says this, so I must do it. And all of a sudden, you end up picking up an injury.
Yeah.
Where if you listen to the signs when you walked in the door, when you things ain't quite right, it's just back off a little bit. And that's one of the things I've learned is, like, literally, if I don't feel right, it's time to back off. Yeah. Because there's a warning sign there somewhere that something bad's going to happen.
Although I found after because I'm 43, and if I listened to my body every time I walked into the gym, I probably would walk back into the car. So.
I guess I was just quite a lucky one. I don't get like a lot of aches and pains and that sort of thing. But if I don't feel right, normally when I start warming up from the bar upwards, I know how good I feel, just based on experience. And if everything feels good, I know I can push things along. And if it don't quite feel right, then I know it's going to be a lot harder than it should be, and I'm going to be sort of putting my body in a vulnerable position if I try and push it on that particular day.
I think let's take a step back and just quickly. I mean, Del, your first competition was in 2004, and you totaled 850. So I mean, it's probably easy to say that you're probably actually quite gifted when it comes to lifting, or the weightlifting has really helped. I mean, your biggest total was 1055. Is that correct? 1055. Yeah. So amazing lifter. Obviously the weightlifting did help, didn't it? I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think it definitely laid the base for sure. And I think it's just the years of training, just getting my body conditioned to sort of handle those periods of weight.
Yeah.
When I started, if you saw the other guys I started with and that sort of thing, I think some of those were probably more gifted than I was. But I just had the ability at the time to work a lot harder. And that sort of that hard work has pretty much just stuck with me up till now.
It's interesting looking at your first total here. You just did the one attempt. Well, they've only got the recorded the one attempt, but your first competition is squatting 350. And you're deadlifting 330. So those are the sort of numbers that people seek to achieve over a lifetime. And here you are with your opening competition. But a 170 bench. So obviously there was no carryover from the weightlifting. I guess those muscles weren't really recruited to the same extent.
There's a few things that sort of contributed to struggling on the bench. One, I didn't do really a lot of upper body work when I was weightlifting. So I wasn't doing any sort of form of bench press, shoulder presses, tricep push downs and that sort of thing. And two, I dislocated my elbow in 1999 and had my elbow reconstructed. So it took a lot to be able to sort of perform different movements after that sort of injury. It's okay now and I can work hard now, but it took quite a long time to do various different movements and put different stresses through it.
Yeah. I see within a space of a year, though, you went from 170 to 205 on the bench. So,
it just at work. I just literally just
put the work in.
Something I keep working hard on and just push through. But even though I'm sort of better on the squat and the deadlift, I do enjoy training the bench.
So, you mentioned the injury. That was quite a catastrophic injury at the time, wasn't it, with the weightlifting?
Yeah, what happened was I was training just before the qualifiers for the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, and I was doing a snatch. I think it was like sets of 3, about 140 kilos. So I'd done the first 4 sets, and then on set number 5, which is my last set, I'd done the first 2 quite comfortably, and on the last one, the bar started traveling back behind my head. But as you see, a lot of Olympic lifters, when they do repetition work on the snatch, they wear lifting straps. So I had lifting straps on, so the bar travelled behind my head, and normally you just let go, and then the bar just releases. But one hand came away from the bar, and the other hand, the strap locked on the bar. So I basically pulled the elbow around and dislocated my elbow. 9 times out of 10, you're okay with that, but with me, when I dislocated, I completely tore the medial ligament. So,
and that was unheard of at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was unheard of at the time. It wasn't really documented that any weightlifters recovered from that type of surgery. So after I'd sort of had the accident, I went along to the weightlifting team doctor, had an MRI, and they said, the doctor looked at it, and he's a real posh bloke, well-spoken English, highly educated. It's like, oh shit, what the fuck have you done? When he said that, knowing you never hear the guy swear, I was like, this is pretty bad. So he took me up to one of his friends in another part of the hospital, an orthopedic surgeon, and he had a look at my elbow. And then he's one of these guys that went away and researched things. And after a couple of days, he gave me a call and said, would I like to go and see him to discuss my elbow? So I was like, yeah. So I went and spoke to him. And through his research, he found it's quite a common injury in baseball with pitchers tearing the medial ligament. And he looked up the surgery that they performed to help these baseball players go back to training, and it was very successful in baseball, but it was unheard of in weightlifting. They had no idea how it would go to like the first time you do like a heavy lift above your head. So he said, look, I can try and perform this surgery, and he's completely honest. He said, I've never performed this surgery on anyone in the past and anyone previously to you.
Fills you with confidence.
So you'd be the first to have it done. And also he done his research and said it's never been documented to be done on a weightlifter. But to be honest, at the time, I didn't really care. I just wanted an opportunity to see if I can lift again. So he said there's probably about a 40% chance you can go back to lifting. So I just thought, you know what, 40% chance is better than no chance at all. So I had the surgery done and never looked back.
And then 3 years later, wins gold at the Commonwealth Games.
It was probably less than that, 'cause it's the end of 1999, so just under 2 years.
Yeah. Mad. So it worked.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was a bit touch and go in the beginning, 'cause like when you've had surgery and you start lifting weights and you think, 20 kilo bar feels heavy, or you think, this don't feel stable above my head. It's hard to look forward to see how you're going to get these bigger weights in the same position, but slowly but surely over time it happens.
So just for listeners, etc., what was your best ever snatch?
What, previous to the injury?
No, just in just lifetime. What's your best ever snatch?
165 in competition and 170 in training.
And then what's your best clean and jerk?
210 in competition and 220 in training. Because at the Commonwealth Games, I thought I was going to have to lift a lot more in the clean and jerk to win. So I was prepared to lift like 220 or maybe a little bit more, because I'd done that in training. But then I got there on the day and I already won after my first attempt. So I just took a jump to break the record again, and then passed my third attempt.
Is that disappointing, Delroy, when you know you've won, like when your first attempt? Or is it kind of like, I was like, phew, that's a bit of a relief.
It's such a big occasion. I wanted to win, and I was mentally prepared to do a lot more to win and put myself through more to do it. But then after the snatch, my snatch was my worst lift. And then when I won gold in the snatch, I just knew it was game over then. I knew I was going to win at that point. But it's a question of what I was going to have to do to win. And the clean and jerk was my best lift. But when I'd done the second attempt, I really wanted to go out to do 220. But I already won. And in my head, I was already satisfied. So to lift a bigger weight, you can't walk in with your head already satisfied.
No.
And I knew, because my head was in that place and it was already satisfied, I knew just don't go out for the attempt.
No place for satisfaction in powerlifting. How do those numbers compare to the equivalent at the time at the Olympics, for example? Like if you'd done the same numbers at the Olympics,
if you look, the clean and jerk, bear in mind, my best in training was 220. The world standards, which would, if you break more, or be the world record, was 232.5.
Okay, so that's, how big a jump is 10 kilos in that lift? Are we talking years of training or just on a good day?
It could have been done, to be honest. But if I look back now, sitting here now, I'm far more physically stronger now, and probably in some ways more explosive now than when I was lifting back then.
Oh, come back.
So it could have been done. Just not as mobile now to get in the positions to Olympic lifts.
So people in their 40s, it's not unheard of to do the Olympics, eh? There is precedent for it.
To be honest, that's not one of my goals now. I think that goal's in the past and will stay in the past.
Stay in the past, fair enough.
I never quite achieved it, but I still achieved sort of pretty decent things there. So
three golds in the Commonwealth is more than the majority of the
majority of the world.
Goals in the Commonwealth powerlifting.
I haven't got as many
I got
goals.
to meet a lot of fantastic people within the sport. So one of the highlights for me is the first time I competed in the WPC World, and I met Ed Cohn before I even spoke to him, and he come over and he knew who I was.
That's awesome.
So for things like that, those sort of things are so satisfying. That could be just as satisfying as what I've done in Olympic lifting. Just so he's someone like that knows who I am.
Did he have any words of? Did he give you any advice or on the day? Because I haven't met Ed Cohen, or does he just give you just support and?
Ed's an interesting person. He never gave me advice in the day, but later on he gave me advice. I was looking at changing the way I trained a little bit, and then he saw me doing some sort of things online, and he messaged me, and it's like, "You're strong as fuck already. Why do you have to change anything?" And then sort of those words sort of rang my head. So it's just like, sometimes if something's working, keep doing it.
Mm.
He's a funny guy, eh? Like when I met him at first, he's like, "Oh, you got a good deadlift, yeah?" And I was like, "Oh, I suppose." He just spots it on people, he just picks you out. But then I was like, "Oh, yeah, like it's all right. It's fucking nothing like yours, obviously." And then you get this thing. We had this photo where we were doing a fist pump, and his hand, he's like, at my shoulder, but his hand is like another half the size of mine. It's huge.
Good for deadlifts.
Yeah, man. He's got ridiculous proportions. It's I don't think I've never seen anyone else like shaped like him. He's like a little sack of concrete with these massive baseball mitts.
Yeah, and he's one of these people, like, it's weird to describe. If someone's really, really good at something, he don't have to tell you, but you get an aura around him knowing that he's something pretty special.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I can, like, the words I can use. The same with like Andy Bolten as well.
Yeah.
You don't have to know what he's done, but you know when you speak to him or you're around him, you know he's done something things that's very special.
Hey, Del, just on that, I know you've mentioned in the past that the history of the sport is not as well known as, say, some of the other bigger sports. I mean, we three throw around names like Andy Bolten and Ed Cohen, and we know exactly who we're talking about. There's probably a whole generation of lifters now that Ed who, you know. And if you don't know Ed Cohen, then the rest of the names are probably, I mean, there's almost a ranking. And if you don't know Ed Cohen, then other names on that list are probably going to be equally as obscure, which is a real shame.
You've got to look at, like, for example, find a boxing fan somewhere who loves boxing who don't know who Muhammad Ali is or what he's done for the sport.
Not even a boxing fan, it's just average Joe public, you know.
So for someone who calls himself a powerlifter with the history of the sport, how can you not know who someone like Ed Cohen is or Andy Bolten? Like, they're like light years ahead of anyone else at their time and set the standards. Like, if they didn't do what they've done in their sort of lifting careers, the standard of lifting wouldn't be as high as it is now.
I think
because they're the sort of the forefront of showing people what can be done.
It's an odd one because powerlifting these days is so prevalent on social media that you just get shown the social media stars of powerlifting aren't necessarily the best lifters. You know what I mean?
There's things in social media. People think you're the best lifter. If you've got, say, 100,000 followers, someone will automatically think you're a better lifter than the next person just because you've got 100,000 followers. That don't mean nothing. That just shows you're good at marketing yourself or just good at buying people to follow you.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these lifters, the ones that are not necessarily at the top, but have got the more followers, their channel is more almost entertainment focused at times, versus just, you know, boring old here's me squatting, here's me benching, here's me deadlifting. You know, they've got a lot more going on. Hence, probably more followers. They're probably more followers and not necessarily other powerlifters, but just people in general for the entertainment value.
Yeah, that's probably just my generation sort of thing. Well, I still think if you're going to be that type of person, I think you should have done something significant. But then social media, how many
you've just summed up the whole problem with social media. Yeah.
It's just about how you can market yourself or put a filter on your photo to make yourself look better.
That's where you're going wrong, Jackson. No, it's just lifting. Yeah,
not enough filters. Need more filters.
Well, no, I think you need to do a bit more than just lift, mate. You need to filming those nights out too.
Some selfies coming up, you know, booty shots, etc. I need to start the hump day hashtag, you know.
Hey, booty shots win.
Yeah.
You have a guy squatting 1,000 pounds in a pair of knee sleeves and make it look really good, or a booty shot, he's going to get more likes.
Yeah, it's ludicrous, isn't it?
That's what it comes down to.
Do you think? I feel like some of it these days, because a lot of the powerlifters I talk to now, like, I mean, you've been lifting for 30 years. I've only been powerlifting for 10 years. And people think, I'm like a veteran of the sport or something, because all these, there's a lot of people these days who have only been powerlifting for like 2 or 3 years. So they've almost discredited everyone that lifted more than, you know, before the explosion of raw lifting. They're like, oh, they wore suits, doesn't count. So like Ed Cohen and Andy Bolten and Greg Panora and stuff, they're not even names that are on people's radars these days.
Yeah, and I think, like, for example, like with yourself, to be honest, like where people say, like, respect and everything else, even though you haven't had a 20 or 10 year long career, in your period of time you've been lifting, you've paid your dues. And that's the difference. So you've worked your way along and you're known for your lifting ability, not what competitions you've won. You're known for your ability to lift. And you're not selling that. People know that because they look at what you do and think, wow, that's impressive. So you're not trying to sell that. That's just what people see. So yeah, you've paid your dues and you deserve to be in that position. And then you can get another person who's won some competition, broke some world record in the obscure federation, and they'll just sell the fact they broke a world record, but won't tell you what that world record is, won't tell you what that federation is or how it compares to the rest of the powerlifting world. So those are the differences there.
Yeah, I guess. Sorry, thank you. I'll take that. But do you think it's now? It seems to be this whole thing of unless you did it raw, it doesn't count. Like everyone wants to who's big these like Russ Orhe and like Amanda Lawrence and stuff because I like the big social media stars etc. from the IPF as such. And so like Ed Cohen, obviously, he's got a lifetime ban from IPF. Fine. People were going to get banned for going to his seminar. I don't care. He's still the best lifter ever, but people seem to have this thing about how...
I saw that post today about it. But if you go to the seminar, you're not allowed to go to the seminar. You can't even be in the same room as him.
How ridiculous is that? What's
going to happen?
I've shaken his hand. Does that mean I have a lifetime ban from IPF?
Yep, I've just written it down somewhere. Sorry.
All right, sorry. Mail it in.
You're on the list.
The thing is that they don't do themselves any favours doing that because what about then if someone tests positive for drugs in the IPF, they get a 2-year ban and they're still freely allowed to go back to the sport and compete again. So their stance on it is probably a little bit hypocritical. And when you know some like the stories of a lot of the stuff that happened around those sort of times and that sort of thing, it just leaves a little bit of a bad taste, to be honest, when you see something like that happen.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because they're still fighting for this recognition to get into the Olympics, but it's never going to happen.
I think in fairness, though, a lot
of people might disagree with me here. I think it's sort of like flogging a dead horse a little bit because if you look at the Olympics, they're always cutting back on Olympic sports all the time. Weightlifting's starting to get a pretty bad name in terms of sort of drug tests, the politics, and a lot of the things that happen behind the scenes. And because powerlifting's like a lifting sport, and they'll see some of the same sort of things happening there. So if weightlifting got kicked out, do they really think another lifting sport's going to go in to take its place? I don't think so. And weightlifting's got such a long history in the Olympics, it's going to be very difficult to take it out as a sport anyway. And there's only room for one lifting sport. So politics, I can't see it happening.
I mean, people literally call it Olympic lifting. That's like one of the coined phrases of it, is Olympic lifting. So it's
one of the sports that's never been missed an Olympic Games since day one.
Yeah.
I want to say, just in defense of the IPF, they've still got the extremely brilliant standards when it comes to lifting. They are.
You know what? I'm a big fan of the IPF when it comes to their standards of lifting and especially their judging. And I think if all federations judge to the same standard, powerlifting would be a far better place. So I take my hat off to the IPF from that. And the way they promote their sport with like SBD and things like that. So they do some incredible things.
I was just because I saw a video the other day. Jackson, you might have seen it floating around. Daryl, you might have seen it floating around too. The lifter's name is Tractor. Have you seen that one?
Oh, comparing IPF lifting to...
No, it's just I don't know what meat it is, and I don't want to discredit. I don't want to just.
Oh wait, is this the multiply one?
Multiply 1,300 pounds.
Oh Jesus Christ,
yeah.
that was.
I think I made a few comments about that myself.
I think everyone in the powerlifting world's made a few comments about that one. Yeah.
Honestly, how ludicrous is that?
I mean, you don't usually like to say you can't judge squat from the front, but that's
that's rubbish. Generally, 9 times out of 10, if a squat looks high from the front, it generally is high.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's some cases that it might not be, where you use wider stances and that sort of thing. But 9 times out of 10, if it looks high from the front, it generally is high.
I felt sorry for this kid.
From the front.
I felt sorry for this kid because I think the original post was put up by his dad, who was dead proud. But of course, went public and it's just been totally annihilated. And the poor kid. I mean, it's not his fault at the end of the day that he got judged white lights. But unless you're blind.
That's where people go wrong. Rather than what the people should do that have got something to say about the video is don't judge the person under the bar. Judge the 3 people that are sitting in front of him that are responsible for giving him the white lights.
Yeah.
They're the ones that should be taking the crap from that.
Yeah, I think there was one ref that gave them a red. I think that one ref.
It was 2 to 1.
2 to 1. See, imagine being that one person going, guys, what were you looking at?
Yeah, did we just watch the same squat?
And the thing is, like, for example, if you watch that back on video, if you're the judge that give it a white light, how stupid do you feel after that event? Because I know there's making mistakes and everything else, and there's a margin for error. But how big is that margin for error? It's huge. Even a blind person can see that squat was high.
Is it half a foot? Is that the margin for error? Like, we don't need like a laser to tell that was high. Like, he barely bent his knees, I would have said. Like,
you don't even need to be a powerlifter to know that squat's high or not.
Yeah. I feel like, it needs to be the judges that are held accountable for that sort of stuff. But there are a lot of, it seems to also be a thing that there are people that search out for these meets to post fucking bullshit totals.
It's very simple. For all the judges just need to be on the same book. So before a meet even starts, why don't the judges get together in the back, discuss the rules, and say, look, this is the criteria we're going to set between us. This is the standard of judging we expect to give, and then adhere to those rules. How can someone see something that extreme difference between them? So one person's given a white light and two others give a red light.
Have you guys noticed how if a video is put up of a poor lift, 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, it's a squat. You know, you very rarely see a poorly executed bench or a poorly executed deadlift. It's squat depth, time and time again, which is the killer.
Because
there's one person I commend on that though. I think it was a Mark Bell meet. It must have been last year or the year before, one of the super training ones. And is it Andrew Herbert?
Andy Herbert.
He done a squat and it was clearly high, and the judges gave him 3 white lights, and it might have been an all-time world record. And a day later, when he watched the videos back, he actually went on social media and said he wants that record to be completely discredited. And I take my hat off to him and I hold him in the absolute utmost respect for doing that, because not many people would do that, as you've seen over the history.
I remember that. And the tragedy is, we had Andy Herbert on the podcast last week. We didn't bring it up, Jackson.
I forgot to bring it. Well, I mean, mate, we went on so many fucking tangents on that podcast.
Yeah. But how amazing is that? I mean, I would hands on heart do the same thing if I rewatched my lift and thought, no, that's just atrocious.
Oh, if things were that bad, and people give me so like. And the thing is with him as well, he went out and put that video out saying he wanted the record discredited before people actually started giving him loads of crap about it or posting negative things on the videos.
Well, you know, as a lifter, it's not going to be the ref. Only if you're going to blame the refs. Everyone else is going to say, well, you're just a shit lifter looking for easy meets. Yeah, and he's clearly not a bad lifter.
And he's clearly what I'd call a credible, a real lifter. And I take my hat off to him. Things like that could change the sport if more people did it.
I do remember that, and it was like you say, he hadn't actually put any videos up on social media yet. The only video people had seen was the live stream, and people were still questioning it. And
they were only questioning it before the big boom, where people were all going to put their boot in.
Yeah, and so then he put that response up relatively quickly, and then said, "Yeah, no, that's it. No, it was shit."
And that's the thing that impressed me the most. Rather do it though because you're sort of forced to do it by social media. He'd done it off his own bat because he knew it wasn't right, and you got to take your hat off to someone like that.
Yeah, he's a top-notch bloke. I think we definitely need to get him back on at some stage. The amount of chat yarns with that guy was ridiculous.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Because he trains at Dan Green's place, Boss Barbell, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Boss Barbell. Yeah.
I know a lot of feds will give you the ability to challenge a lift subsequent to the meet. It goes towards a committee or a jury, but it's usually the other way around. Like if it was red lighted, you can actually, you can make a claim and they can review and change the results. But I think it's pretty rare for that to happen the other way around too. So it should, yeah.
Yeah, it's just almost unheard of the other way around. What is unheard of? Because I've never come across it till I've seen him do that.
And that's one of the issues with powerlifting, isn't it? There's no governing body that oversees the whole sport.
The trouble is, there's too many governing bodies.
Everyone wants to be a governing body, yeah.
And the thing is, if you look at the rule books, all the rules are pretty much written from the original, what you call IPF rules years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
So they're all basically worded from that, but their interpretations all seem to be very, very different. What's
your now, Delroy? You obviously didn't. You did an IPF meet originally, didn't you? That was your first meet. Was the IPF? Or that's not recorded on Open Powerlifting, but I remember you mentioning that during your
it was baller or basically IPF rules.
Yeah, And then straight away, a few weeks later, you did the British Nationals, was it?
Yeah, the main reason for that is really, it's just literally watching those Steve Goggins and Andy Bolten videos. When you saw the environment those guys were lifting with a monolift, the people cheering, and the whole show and everything behind it, that's the sort of route I was more interested in taking. Because like with my weightlifting career, I've already done the sort of the same sort of style of lifting with like the no music in the background and all that sort of thing. With
I was going to ask that question. Is weightlifting the same? Is it very quiet and?
Yeah, it's very quiet until like a big lift is above your head and you're supporting it. And then when people realise that you broke a record, you can sort of feel the crowd sort of erupt in the background.
Yeah. Polite
polite round of applause.
It's just like completely different environments. But it's each though, it's what you want to sort of do for yourself or the environment that you want to compete in makes your choice for you.
So WPC offered that. It was a bit more of a energetic type environment to
that energetic sort of type of environment, which like at that time was really, really cool for me because I never really experienced it in weightlifting. I've experienced like big crowds and when crowds go really erupt when I won the Commonwealth Games. So that's a completely different feeling. Not all competitions are like that.
That's probably quite unique to that level of competition, I'd assume. Not many people feel that.
You know, I'm one of the lucky, fortunate ones to sort of feel that sort of energy behind you in the background in an event like that. But that sort of thing would never be able to be replicated again.
That's massive. So you went obviously 10:55 multiply.
Yeah, I could have probably, if I'd have probably continued along the multiply route, I've probably done a lot more. And I've probably done better lifts in training. So if I'd have put all my best lifts in training, I'd have probably done like 11:20, maybe 11:50.
Wow.
That's huge. And I mean, that was back in 2008.
2008, yeah.
Yeah.
445 squat is just astronomical. 240 bench and a 370 deadlift, yeah.
At the time, yeah.
Under 110. I mean, that's massive numbers. Even nowadays, that's big numbers. You know, there's bugger all people hitting those. But like back then,
we've talked about this.
That under 110?
Yeah, that was he was 108.8 on the day.
Yeah, and that wasn't with no weight cut. That's just what I walked in at the time as well. But back in those days, so for example, before that competition, I competed against a guy called Craig Coombs, and the British record on the squat was 400 kilos in that sort of weight class. So and that's how far we pushed each other. Literally every squat was a record attempt. So we pushed each other to that degree in that particular competition. And it's pretty good because that competition was actually broadcast on Sky Sports.
That's amazing.
It's awesome. So you guys blew past all the records, obviously world standard. That's and then you made this. Sorry,
Andy, I just wanted to say in that particular competition now you got Andy Bolten hit a 1200 total, 500 squat, 285 bench, 415 deadlift.
Yeah, I think Donnie Thompson competed in that competition as well, but I believe he bombed on the squat.
Yeah, I've just, usually you look at these lists in open powerlifting and you see the odd DQ, but this one has close to over 10, 12, 13 different lifters that bombed, eh?
But bear in mind, like Donnie and Andy were like opening like, I think it's like 500 kilo squats or something like that. It's absolutely crazy.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they were trying to squat like 1,100 pounds or some shit, like 550. You know, it's
it was amazing, and that's a big theatre in Bournemouth, so it was a real good competition.
Was there additional pressure on your lifters with having Sky Sport there? Do you think that would have added to the people's anxiety levels or nerves?
To be honest, for me, it didn't really add any anxiety for nerves or anything like that. I just wanted to look good on telly when it's broadcast. I didn't want to cut a failing lift, so it just comes down to that more than anything else.
Try and smile while you've got like 420 kilos on your back. Smile for the camera.
Yeah, when you saw like doing 20 kilo PBs and stuff like that, you just had to try and make it look the best way you possibly could.
That's crazy. That's big numbers, yeah, even these days. So back then, that's like unheard of. 2008. And then you made the swap over to Raw in 2012. So that's basically when Raw became a thing, was 2011, 2012.
Yeah, I think my last quick competition was probably like 2010 at the GPC World Championships. So I competed equipped then. And then after that, where I sort of moved areas and I changed jobs, I had a year off the competition. Then I came back to it in must have been like 2012.
Yeah. And then you've just competed raw or with wraps, etc. raw ever since. So you came back
I've
with
competed raw with wraps and raw and sleeves as well.
I think it's worth touching on as well, Daryl. Tell us about the Olympia, and the Olympia Powerlifting Invitational, deadlift only, from the looks of it.
Yeah, I've done that a couple of times. The first time was that was interesting because the first time I'd done it, a lot of the Americans didn't really know who I was, and they had the powerlifting area at ground level, and then they had the world's strongest bodybuilder. I think it was like Johnny Jackson, and it wasn't Stan Efferding at the time. It was against another guy. I can't remember who his name was. So they were up on the big stage, and then I was down on the floor level competing, and all of a sudden the people are looking on the big stage. And you see these big jack bodybuilders, like deadlifting like 350s and that sort of thing. And then I went out and done 360, like 10 kilos more than them around the sort of same time.
Yeah.
And he was like, you can see people looking at the stage. It's like, how's that little guy doing what those big jack guys are doing up on the stage? and that created a lot of sort of buzz at the Olympia, and that was a really good experience for me doing that there.
Weight-wise, I mean, obviously the bodybuilding muscle is larger, but weight-wise, between you and Johnny Jackson, he must have been fairly similar. I can't remember how big he is.
I weighed at the time, I weighed about 110 kilos, and Johnny probably was about 125 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But I think it was about a year after that, I competed at the Body Power Expo, and then I was competing, and Johnny come over and we started talking, and the president of the federation, the one who organised the big competition with Sky Sports, actually had it organised for me and Johnny to go head-to-head at the Body Power Expo the following year.
Oh, nice.
I think it might have been like 2014 or something like that. But it didn't come to fruition because the BPC as a federation finished. So, and it moved on to another federation there. So that competition never happened, which is a real big shame, to be honest. So I'd have liked to compete one-on-one with Johnny Jackson.
That's I was having a chat with some friends last night, and that was we talked about Dalen Bailey, and one of her signature videos was where she had a bunch of lifters from different disciplines all come and compete, and in similar style sports, and that was a huge hit, in terms of popularity and hits and so forth. It was massive. She had CrossFit versus bodybuilding versus powerlifting versus weightlifting, I think too, and women. And people loved it because they like to see the comparison between all of them.
Oh, it'd be an interesting concert, that one, definitely. And I think like people say a lot of bad things about CrossFit, but I believe it's really helped sports like weightlifting and even powerlifting to a point to filter some really sort of good, talented lifters towards the sport.
Only Jackson says bad things about CrossFitters. Yeah.
Okay, honestly, in all honesty, CrossFit cops, I give them a lot of shit. Same with people who pull sumo, I give them a lot of shit. But it's, for sumo, if you win, you win. Fuck it, it counts. Same with CrossFit. They have done a lot for every other lifting sport because it's made lifting comparable for the average person. Like everyone wants to watch strongman and stuff.
I think they've contributed towards the sort of people are going to the gym now for a purpose, other than just looking good or being healthy. They're coming to the gym now. I think CrossFit helped to make people believe that there's a pathway for competition, whether or not be CrossFit, but they've gone, oh, what else is there? Okay, there's weightlifting, there's powerlifting and so forth. There's strongman. I think there's more gym goers now with that intent in mind than there was in the past. And I think CrossFit helped contribute towards that.
Oh, yeah. I think CrossFit helps because it gets people involved in the sport, and actually, when you sort of walk in, it actually makes those sports a little bit more accessible. And I think it's helped the sport. Maybe the format of CrossFit and everything might not be brilliant, but in terms of lifting sport, it's definitely helped raise the popularity.
And I think it's also one of the big reasons on why we've seen an increase in female lifting, because it's showing 100%. People that, girls can lift weights, not just run on the fucking treadmill or the cross trainer.
Oh yeah, women's lifting's like taken a massive boom. For example, in say 2008, like BPC British Championships, they probably had like maybe 2 women in total at that competition competing.
Wow.
Now in some competitions you'd have to have a whole day dedicated to female lifting, which is a good thing, and the level of like the standard of lifting is just really accelerated as well. There's some phenomenal lifters.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we've got a comp coming up down here in like 5 weeks, and we've basically sold it out, and we've got more females than guys. You know, we've got more girls lifting than guys. It's taken off, and we've had that pretty much every comp we've done.
I think that's down to you, Jackson, being a bit of the sex. You know. Ooh, is Jackson going to be there?
Yeah. Oh,
they just want to turn up to meet you, Jackson.
Yeah. I got to keep the fans happy, you know. Whatever.
Okay. You know. So, Delroy, you're
get the likes on social media.
Oh, Jackson's all about the likes, yeah.
Oh, maybe it's lucky I don't do any booty shots then, because it'd just get out of hand.
Oh, blow up, mate. Yeah, you'd have to be on the phone all day. Only fans. So, Delroy, you've just competed incessantly, for year after year after year. You know, even the end of the start of last year, you were at the Tattooed and Strong event.
Yeah, I think I've pretty much competed every year since I started weightlifting. The only year, actually, no, I have, because in 2011, where I had a year off, I done one competition I think it was January at the LA Expo, and I didn't do anything else for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty much every year since I started when I was 15 years old, I've competed in a competition.
What's been your favorite competition?
My most successful one was the Commonwealth Games. My favourite competition was probably that British Championships, Powerlifting Championships in 2008, where I competed against Craig Coombs. Because literally from the opening attempt to the last attempt, it was just back and forth battle.
Oh,
like I would take the lead, then Craig would take the lead, then I'll take the lead back. Then we get into the bench press. I went well behind. Then in the first deadlift, I was back in the lead, and it just kept going backwards and forwards like that. And it's just a really exciting competition. And I like to be involved in competition. I don't like sort of going on the platform and competing against myself.
I don't think many people actually appreciate that, because, you know, with the dilution of the number of feds and the dilution of the classes, because there's 150 weight classes and so forth, you know, I don't think people really appreciate that battle, and it's not often you see a true battle. You know, I know, Jackson, you're striving for it. I'm going to strive for it as well. But to try to stack the classes and the level of competition to the point where you can get that to and fro, because that's what makes a powerlifting comp next level. And I don't think
that's what makes it special.
Yeah. And I don't think many people have experienced that. But once they experience it, they'll go, I can see now why you've done what you've done with the classes and the divisions and so forth. You know.
That's the thing that's missing in powerlifting. Like, for example, the GPC Worlds that me and Jackson competed in.
Well, let's talk about that. Yes.
Here we go.
There we go.
I wonder where this was going to come up.
I know. We had to finish on the high.
He's a rising star. I just caught him at the right time.
Adding quite resume. That's definitely handy.
The thing is with that competition is, like, I was quite fortunate above the other lifters. So I know who Jackson was, and Bulldog spoke highly of him, so I knew it was going to be dangerous. So when I had an eye on Jackson and the others, none of the others had an eye on Jackson. And all of a sudden, he went from like being down in the squat to being like a top contender after a couple of presses on the bench.
Ooh. And
a lot of the other guys didn't see it coming because they didn't realise how talented he was. I'm not just saying that because he's on the screen in front of me.
No, I remember that comp. I remember when I was training with Dave, and we were 6-8 weeks out or whatever. We were just chilling, and I was like, and you know, the lifters list comes out, and I'm just like Sherlock Holmes on fucking Instagram, and I'll find these people and I find out what they're doing, and I'm like, oh yeah, some of those guys are pretty strong. I think I should have it though. I should be all right, because it was my first year in the open and whatever, and I was like, I should be all right. It'll be good. And I knew that Del was going, and we talked about it, and I was like, no, it's fine. He does the 110s. He's a master. All good. Don't have to stress. It's fine. I've got this one.
Just for our listeners, sorry to interrupt, Jackson, just for our listeners' benefit, I'm just on the open powerlifting page for that particular competition, and usually you do a couple of scrolls on the mouse wheel to see who the lifters are. I scrolled probably 15 times on the list here, and it stops at 604, and anything under that, and anyone under that's been disqualified. So 604 results on the page. That is a massive comp.
It was a big comp, man. They had like I think they counted it as, including single lifts, they had almost 1,000 starts.
Wow.
You know, 1,000 lifters, because
Amazing.
people did multiple comps. But that Czech Republic comp, that was a big comp.
Just
It's
scrolling down.
amazing how they actually got that many lifters through that particular venue, because I don't think that venue is anything special to talk
That
about.
was shit. That venue was shit. I think Serbia did it better the year before, you know, although there is that. No, that's a lie. That warm-up room in Czech Republic was definitely better, but the venue wasn't great. But
What makes a great venue?
I would say
It's just something well organised with a decent amount of space and something you're going to create a good atmosphere in.
Yeah, I would say, especially for a comp that level, it's the atmosphere you can create. Whereas that was like a school hall.
Yeah, there's a school hall with a warm-up room dumped in the back.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the floor was like those bouncy floorboards that they just put a deadlift
One of those
platform
ones.
on.
I'm not going to drop a deadlift fast on this one because it's going straight through.
And almost control it down, you know.
So just got to scroll the mouse wheel down a bit here, Jackson, to find your name.
Hang on, scroll it back up, bro.
Where are you?
You've gone too far down.
There you go, number 8. Yeah.
The
number 8 out of 600 and something is still bloody amazing. Yeah.
Number 8. Fuck, I was that far down.
Yeah, yeah. There was.
Hang on, you've got it on Wilkes, bro. No one gives a shit about formula.
No,
Go on total.
I don't think it actually. Oh yeah, no, it's not on total. Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's on gloss. It's on gloss.
No one gives a shit about gloss.
Forget that. Who cares about body weights?
Total.
So how do I reorder? There we go, by total.
Come on, Greg, you work for a tech company. It's not that hard.
I know, but you know, there's a big screen I got going on here, thanks to the company I work for. Where's your name? Where's your name? It's on total now. Oh, you're number 7 now. That's
right. I'll take that. I went up.
You went from 8 to 7. Yeah.
So yeah. Well, so anyway, so we're prepping for this comp, and I was like, yeah, no, I'll be okay. I knew what I wanted to hit. That was my comp that I was aiming for 900, and I had the attempt sort of planned out in my head. And then we get there, and we're in the warm-up room. I was with like Steve Hampton and Thomas Lilly and stuff, and Steve was competing the day before us. And I go and weigh in, and I'm in the warm-up room with the lads, and Dell comes over, and I was like, "Hey, bro, how you going?" Da-da-da. He's like, "Yeah, good." And he was looking too happy, and I was like, "This is fucking bullshit. What's going on? This doesn't look like a man who's cut weight." And he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm doing the open 125s," and I was like, "Wait, what?" And then that, because you'd done, what had you done at that Vegas Worlds, Dell? 9:12 and a half or 9:13?
Yeah, 9:12 and a half, I think, of the Vegas Worlds, and that was what, 2015.
Yeah, so then this is like, so I knew that Dell had already beaten what I was like aiming for on like my best day, so I was like, oh fuck, here we go, I'm fucked here. And but it was great. And then but yeah, like Dell said, I think we opened, there was probably 6 of us in that class. I think we definitely had the biggest class, the most competitive class,
without doubt, the highest standard class, I think, by far.
Yeah, there was 7 of us, 7 or 8 of us, all over 800. And I opened the lightest out of the top 7, you know, because I always take big jumps. And so, like Dale said, the guys didn't really think about me. They were like, "Oh, this is this young guy. He'll be fine. He's doing this." Yes. But I took 20 kilo jumps, whereas they were taking 5 kilo jumps. And after squats and bench, I then bumped up and then had a decent deadlift. And I just missed my deadlift for 900, so I think I ended up on 885, and Dell got 915.
915 and a half. You got you got 887 and a half. Give yourself that half, mate.
887 and a half. There you go. Missed that 2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, every kilo counts.
Yeah.
That who's this? I've never heard of Mataba Maleki.
Yeah, he squatted 500 that comp.
So, and that was in bloody reps too. 500. That must have been impressive, eh?
That was just after Vlad had done it. He was the second guy ever to do it, and it was legit. I don't know about you, Dale, but
there was a massive buzz in the hall when he done that.
Yeah, it was huge, man. I was like throwing people out the way to get to like the front row. Like it was, yeah, and that was a legit squat. I would argue.
Oh, it was a legit squat. But the funny thing about that competition was when it comes to the total, if you like put your push pull totals together, I think both of ours were higher than his push pull total.
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
bench
I mean,
and the deadlift. So
yeah, he squatted 500 and he deadlifted like 3 or something. Like it was.
yeah, I think he failed like 320 deadlift maybe or something like that.
No, it says here 340. Got 340.
Oh, 340.
Yeah, that's you guys on a bad day, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, back then, that's us. Yeah, that's us back on a bad day.
Yeah, Del, you got 375.5.
Yeah, and I passed my last attempt as well.
Yeah, and Jackson 342.5. So yeah, definitely you beat him on the deadlift. Yeah.
That was a sick comp, and the atmosphere for that was mint, and I think people definitely enjoyed our class as such because the order just kept changing. That was awesome. That's one of my favorite comps.
Actually kept changing.
Yeah, so when I said I came back and everyone was like, "Oh, you pissed that you got second," and I was like, "Nah,
no,
it was alright. I got beaten by fucking Delroy." So it's and I said,
he's mad comp.
Yeah, it wasn't really a second place that I was fussed about. I was quite happy to get second in that respect.
Yeah, it was a good fun comp. I like being involved in competitions like that, and it just makes it a little bit more strategic and just gives you a little bit more to think about as well.
Yeah, so after that that's probably one of my favorite comps actually, to be honest, because because it was super competitive, even though it was a kind of rubbish venue. Actually, I got engaged that trip as well, so that's definitely one of my favorite comps.
Ooh, lucky you mentioned it, mate.
Yeah.
But sometimes it puts the sport in perspective because you can have like a rubbish venue with not great facilities, but the lifters can still put a really good show on and have a really competitive competition. So to be honest, I would take a really competitive competition like that over than a nice fancy venue and something less competitive.
So it looks like Del, that was one of 5 competitions in that year. You're obviously feeling pretty good about good shape, strong, no injuries.
To be honest, when it comes to like a lot of competitions, sometimes it just sort of happens that way. Well, I don't sort of mean to compete in the competitions. Like the competition turns, I think, oh yeah, I've lifted that.
Give it a go.
Now I'll probably pick and choose a little bit more, but back then I just thought, oh yeah, I'll do it, and just to compete, really.
Yeah, and it looks like you've, looking at these acronyms here, you've competed in almost every federation in the UK, from the looks of it.
Yeah, not too far of it. I think the only one I haven't competed in is probably the BDPFA.
Okay, is that a new one?
No, that's quite an old federation. It's the British Drug-Free Powerlifting Federation.
Oh, okay.
That's not IPF?
No, it's not IPF. That one's actually one of the ones the British Army's affiliated to. So there used to be like one federation, and as you know, like egos collide, and then they sort of 2 people go their separate ways, and then another federation forms. So that's pretty much how that one started.
Yeah, crazy.
That's interesting. Yeah, that there's like another variant. I mean, I suppose we have it with
We've got 2 tested variants.
World Powerlifting as well.
WP and IPF.
But the BDPFA is probably I might be wrong on this. It's probably like the second oldest powerlifting federation in the UK, or probably the oldest one. Because if you look at the IPF, they've actually sort of, in a sense, changed hands. Because one minute they used to be part of Baller, and then they sort of branched off, and then they moved to be called British Great Britain Powerlifting Federation, and they've been called a few other things since.
Is there good camaraderie between the federations in the UK, Delroy? Is there no, you're shaking your head, Jackson. There's no collaboration, working together, what works for us works for you, we'll share participants.
You know what? The people say that there's no collaboration, but when there's a time and a place for collaboration, that it has been done. So for example, I don't know if Jackson remembers Dot Shaw.
Yeah,
she was a really good female powerlifter.
Yeah, actually.
And then she passed away a few years ago. So they had a squat competition in Dot's name, and it was actually British Powerlifting. It was their officials that run the competition, and they invited me along to compete in that competition. So there can be collaborations done, and they've actually done it. There's been nothing since then, but it has been done.
The right occasion, I suppose. Because I just remember when I was over there, we had a couple of people come over and come over to Genesis when I was training with Dave, and it's almost like people are like, no, don't go and train there. They
Really?
they squat high, and they whatever they compete GPC and etc. etc. You know, like it was almost like a don't go there, otherwise you're going to get judged wrongly at our comps. Almost. I'm not saying that's what happened, but you know, it was almost like a don't go there. You're not gonna.
Yeah, there is stories like that in the background, but in terms of between the lifters, so it kind of happens, but it at the same time it doesn't, because again, they put on some. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, they put on a UK powerlifting summit in Wales, and that was predominantly like IPF run by their sort of national coach and GB at the time, and he invited me along to be a guest at their powerlifting summit.
Nice.
Oh,
So,
as a sort of a speaker.
Was a speaking engagement rather than
just invited me to be a guest and be a part of it, to sort of listen to what they had to say about different aspects of the sport and everything else. So I think in some situations people say they how can you put it, disrespect maybe is too strong a word, or probably disagree with the other side of powerlifting. But sometimes they do put that to one side, I think, for like sort of in terms of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the vocal minority. You know, it always seems to be the minorities.
Yeah, it's a minority. But then when you look at the top guy, I've been along to some of their power competitions, and like you get the guys like Tony Cleef, Owen Hubbard, and people like that. If I walk in the room, they're the first people to come over and speak to me, ask how training is, how I'm doing, and that sort of thing. And even some of the officials do as well. So I think it's probably more people that are new into the sport, that don't really know the history of sport, maybe, and more sort of take that opinion of things.
Yeah, they feel they almost have to be sort of clicky about it.
Yeah, and that's the side of things that sort of may possibly let that side of the sport down. I think the top guys are all like really respectful, and they're just like guys like me and you. And then you get the sort of the middle of the run guys, and they're completely different.
Yeah, I think, Greg. I mean, we've talked about that before. It's always the middle of the run guys trying to prove themselves, you know, and they always. But
we've I mean, Jackson and I, we run the podcast, Fed Agnostic, and we've had some brilliant guests from across the spectrum come on board. We had the one of the local IPF local regional IPF affiliates, and our first episode, Amy. So that was the second episode.
First one was mine, remember?
That's right. The first one was Jackson's. The 4-hour intro. But we live in we live in a small island at the end of the day, and these are our friends and family and training partners and so forth, and we're all doing the same sport at the end of the day.
Yeah, powerlifting's powerlifting no matter where you do it. You might compete in one federation or the other, but we all do a squat, we all do a bench press, we all do a deadlift, and we've all got the same goals.
Exactly, yeah. And I know, Daryl, you've said before in a previous podcast that you'd like to see all the leaders of all the federations get in a room and nut it out and try to come up with some common ground. Do you think is that still something that you?
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to see it be done. I think there's certain heads of federations that would be very, very willing to do it. And I think you've got the heads of other federations won't be so willing. But sometimes you've got to put all your personal grudges apart and everything else. And you've got to put the sport of powerlifting first and not your ego. And if all these people put the sport first, they'll get together and they could produce an amazing competition.
That I know you say ego is interesting now, but because I know you talked about powerlifting. If it was run more like a sport than a business, so if we run powerlifting more as a sport and remove the egos, what could be possible?
Yeah, I think the trouble with powerlifting now is I'm probably going to get crucified for this. I don't think
I can edit it
it's
out.
there for the good of the sport. It's not. Some of the federations there are not to maintain standards of the sport. I think they're for we need 5,000 members to generate this amount of revenue. So the revenue is not really for the sport. It's obviously going to other places. And that's not right. I think standards need to maintain. Like, for example, if you have a British powerlifting championships, you want to see lifters there doing things that are pretty amazing. You don't want someone just to look there who's just the sort of average run-the-mill trainer on the gym, think, that guy there's British champion, you know what, I can lift as much as them, I'm going to go and lift. That's not what the sport's about. You want to see someone lift something big and think, wow, I want to train hard for like 5 years and I want to achieve something like that.
I think there's almost there's too much emphasis on income coming from the lifters themselves. Let's try and get as many lifters, regardless of capability, into the meet, and then we can attract, the most revenue from entry fees. Versus, hey, how about we just get the best 25 or even 13 lifters, like, thinking big dog. Let's just get the best in the world together, and let's make the income from the revenue that's generated from sponsorships and advertising.
To be honest, I think you can still make the money from like the large number of members. I think you just have to have the competition structured. So you have your sort of like novice competitions and that sort of thing. Then you have a regional circuit, and then you move on to like a national circuit and an international circuit. So you sort of like work your way up the sort of the structure in a sense. But there is no structure. But a lot of people, you can get the average guy at the gym, do training for like 2 or 3 weeks, and they can walk into a competition and qualify for a British Championships.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
I don't see that as being right.
Yeah, because
for example, as well.
Carry on.
Sorry, for example, as well, like for example, international competition. You can get someone qualified for an international competition after just doing one, say, regional qualifier in some federations.
Yeah.
Like when I was weightlifting, it took me a good couple of years to get anywhere near qualifying for an international competition.
Was there and the competition that you could qualify at, was that anything special? Was that called a qualifier, or is it you could qualify but you had to meet a certain threshold in terms of ability?
When I started weightlifting, so you'd compete in, say, like a regional championships at the London Championships, and at the London Championships you'd have to achieve the qualifying total to compete at the British Championships. And then at the British Championships, you'd have to achieve another qualifying total to get on the national squad. And then on the national squad, you'd prove yourself in front of the coaches. And then they say, right, if you lift X amount, like for this qualifying standard, you go to a World Championships.
Wow. Okay. So
before you went to the World Championships, you couldn't bypass any jump from London Championships to a World. You had to go through all of those stages before you could go into a World stage.
Interesting. Yeah.
I suppose that's one of those things that they have one governing body. So it's that thing of there's one, that's the pathway. That's it. Whereas at the moment, obviously, like you say, some federations you have to do that. Some federations you don't. Some federations you don't even have to be, or some competitions you can just go and do. You don't even have to be part of a federation.
Yeah, but I think the federations, some of the federations are going to have to take that route because they've got such a large membership now. And in the sense, the qualifying standard for, say, the British Championships so low that you're just going to get basically have to run over a week or something like that just to get lifters through. So you need to put a qualifying standard where you get, say, I don't know, 50 lifters a day or something like that over a weekend to compete. So it's a high enough standard where people are going to have to, in a sense, train hard to achieve. Not just do some mediocre lifts or mediocre training in the gym and then just sort of step on that platform to compete.
But so the thing for them, for the promoters or meet director or whoever it is, the federation leaders that are running those comps, for them, it's almost not in their best interest to have that, because the more starts they get, it's like those world champs. You think about those world champs that we did where there was 900 lifters. That's 900 entry fees. Think about how much money they've made.
Look at that sort of point.
You know, they for them, if income, like we're saying, if income is their end goal, having a qualifying standard, that's not what they want. They want as many, but it's like bodybuilding.
Yeah.
You know, you ever go to a bodybuilding show? You know, if I want to enter men's physique, open, men's physique, novice, open bodybuilding, classic, I'm paying 5 entry fees.
Yeah.
You know, and they're quite happy to take. They would be like, yeah, sweet, $500, you're in, go hard. Gets more bums on seats.
Yeah, and so that's what it's come down to now. But then, then the standards of the sports diminish, and then long term, that's going to be a little bit counterproductive, I think, because you lose the credibility from that sport.
I know in the bodybuilding world, it's definitely heading that way. As a number of pro cards are getting given out exponentially now.
Ludicrous.
And you're getting events now like the New York Pro for bodybuilding, a big event in the US where there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lifters, and they're complaining about similar things in terms of the events now run over multiple days. And it's simply too much. It's too much for the lifters to be able to accommodate, take a week off work, for example,
Yeah, and it is that, for example, like over here, like if you look, for example, like if you put a competition on during the week, if the kids are off school, okay, then it makes it a little bit easier. But then if you're organising these competitions during term time and you're a parent and all of a sudden you run the competition over a week, a lot of people are going to have to miss out because of childcare and all that sort of thing. So it's just, there's got to be a better way. But I think at the end of that, it's probably just I'm old-fashioned. With me, there's standards I think that have to be achieved.
Yeah, 100%.
So if you're British champion, then you need to be the champion of Britain. You need to lift to a high standard. And when you actually step on the platform, you need to look like you're a British champion in terms of the way you lift and how you present yourself to lift. Not just like look like it's your second competition you stepped on the lifting platform with like your singlet not put up properly when you're going out for your first squat and stuff like that.
Yeah. I was going to say, actually, from a technical perspective, Del's lifting is ludicrous. It's great to watch, and you're very explosive still as well. But the technical side, it all looks the same. That's obviously what you aim for in training. Yeah, that's sort of ingrained from weightlifting.
That's it's partly ingrained from weightlifting, and I sort of figured that out a while ago. If I want to sort of continue lifting the standard I want to lift at, that's the way I'm going to have to do it to sort of minimise risk of injuries and wear and tear on the body.
It's an interesting one. It takes some people a while to figure that out. Sort of when you're training, stay in the pocket, keep your technique right.
Patience. Everyone, when they start lifting, everyone's looking for the fastest route to the top. And I think the fastest route to the top is just do things right from the beginning. Because if you do that and you just continue that route, you never have to take steps back to make changes, to make 2 steps forward.
Yeah.
So there is that. And also listen to the people that have been there before you. Because those guys that have been there before you have all made the mistakes that you're about to make.
Yeah.
So if you can avoid making those mistakes, how much time are you going to save?
Yeah, exactly.
So it might be like a slow process in the beginning, but if you take that slower route, in the end, you're going to get to where you want to be a lot faster.
Like, say for you, like, obviously you had that dislocated elbow in 99, but from a powerlifting standpoint, you haven't had any sort of catastrophic injuries, have you?
No, I've had nothing that I've called like catastrophic injuries. I've had muscle tears, I've torn my quad, I've torn my hamstring, and a few other things, but there's nothing that compared that I'd call like that, anything like that elbow.
No, so you haven't had any full-blown ruptures. Like when you say a quad tear or a hamstring tear, it's just like a grade 2. It's not like a full-blown rupture.
So nothing I'd call serious.
Yeah.
All it do is basically stop you squatting for a few weeks or something like that, and that's about the length of it.
Yeah, so I think that sort of speaks for itself. If a guy who's been lifting for 30 years and is still strong as shit, when was that last comp you did last year? Still pulling like 370, 380 odd after 30 years of lifting. When supposedly
I still feel I'm getting better as well. So.
Nice.
So sort of like where everyone says, you should be sort of finished at this age or things should be winding down.
No.
I just don't see it that way. I see myself like continuously improving. I might not have had the opportunity to show all those improvements on the platform yet, but I will.
So what's the plan moving forward? I know you're aiming for same as me, you're aiming for a 300 for 10 deadlift at some stage.
Yeah, that'll be over the next few months during the lockdown. So to be honest, rather than sort of at the moment competition targets, so we just don't know when they're going to happen again and what sort of format. I said to myself I most likely won't compete till later in the year, possibly at the ABS Pro and the Andy Bolten Deadlift Challenge. But up until then, I've just got little targets I'm setting myself in training. So like in the deadlift, my first target is 300 for 10. Then once I've achieved that, I say, right, I want to do 320 for 8. And then sort of move along, and after that, probably like 350 for 5, and then sort of just build. So just training targets like that, they're important to me.
Yeah.
And then I guess you want to achieve that elusive 400 kilo deadlift at some point, Delroy, yeah?
Yeah, that'll come. I'm not doing what I've done in the past and put pressure on myself, think I must do it in this competition. I'm putting the training in, and in a sense, it's going to come to me. As long as I keep sort of taking that route and putting the work in, when the time is right and the place is right, it will happen.
Nice.
To be honest, if people might sound like talk crap, if we didn't have that lockdown last year and that sort of thing, I think I would have done it at the end of last year.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're hitting you just missed 382.5 in the last comp in March 2020.
But even like, bear in mind with that one, I sort of had a groin injury going into it, and then after that, I'm training. I pulled like 375 really easy on a stiff bar.
Oh, wow.
Not using a deadlift bar, and I know there was a lot more there as well. I could have probably even done another rep if I'd have really pushed it on that day. So to do that on a stiff bar, I know something was pretty big after that one. If I'd have sort of able to sort of get into a competition.
Nice. Right, we'll wrap it up here, Delroy. Thank you so much for coming on. Any shout outs you want to do? Any plugs?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to Performance Fitness Gym in Eastbourne. Really, really supportive in everything I've done in my sort of lifting career over the last 8 years, and really sort of built the gym around strength training, and it's by far the best gym in Eastbourne. I'd like to shout out to Team Infinity, fantastic my supplements, IF Strongwear, providing me like fantastic training kit, and also SBD. They've been really supported over the last couple of years as well.
Awesome. Jackson, any final words from you?
I was going to say that Performance Fitness Ground where Del trains, I've been down there. I coached a couple of people for a comp that we came down for, probably started 2017 or something. It is an amazing gym. Very well set out.
It's even better now. It's all being done up, and there's going to be a lot more space for deadlift platforms, squat stations downstairs. The upstairs is being expanded as well. So next time you visit, it'll be completely different.
That'll be awesome. It's a Scott that runs that still.
Yeah, Scott Halliday.
Yeah, that's awesome gym. I mean, there is space. There is, if you do it properly, there is places for proper strength gyms. You know.
Oh, without a doubt. If you live in Eastbourne, in my opinion, if you want to be involved in strength training or strength sports, there's nowhere else to train to that level.
The place to be. So where do people find you, Del, on Instagram, Facebook, etc.? Because I know you do coaching online as well.
Yeah, just find Facebook, my full name Delroy McQueen, or Instagram. You can contact me on either of those social media networks.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well,
thank you so much, Delroy.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks very much. It's been an honour.
Okay, catch you later.
Yeah, thank you.
See you later on.